Long ago, in the northern kingdom of Israel, a terrible darkness spread across the land, not from the skies, but from the hearts of the people. King Ahab sat on Israel's throne, but he did not walk in the ways of the Lord. Instead, he married Jezebel, a foreign queen who worshipped Baal, the god of storms and fertility. Together, they led the people astray, building temples to Baal, tearing down altars to the Lord, and silencing the prophets who spoke the truth. But in a small town called Tish, high in the mountains of Gilead, there lived a rugged man, wild in appearance, bold in spirit. His name was Elijah. One morning, Elijah rose early. The Lord had spoken to him in the night. He was to carry a message to the king, a message that would shake the very kingdom. Elijah wrapped himself in a rough cloak made of camel hair and set out across the dry hills. He walked with purpose through dusty roads and sun-scorched fields, past withered vines and thirsty cattle. The drought had not yet come, but it was coming. When he reached the city gates of Samaria, the guards looked at him with suspicion. Yet there was something about Elijah, something fierce and unstoppable. They let him pass. He entered the palace, his footsteps echoing across marble floors. At the end of the great hall, seated on a high throne, was King Ahab. Next to him stood Queen Jezebel, her eyes cold and sharp like blades. Elijah didn't bow. He didn't speak with fear. As surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the land for the next few years, except at my word. A hush fell across the room. The courtiers froze. Ahab rose to his feet in anger, his robes billowing around him. How dare you threaten the king of Israel? But Elijah turned and walked out unharmed, unshaken. His words had been spoken, and the judgment had begun. The skies held back their rain. Day after day, week after week, the sun burned hot, and the ground cracked beneath the people's feet. Crops failed. Rivers dried. The groans of the land rose up like smoke from a smoldering fire. Jezebel was furious. She sent her soldiers to find Elijah, but he was nowhere to be seen. The Lord had spoken again, telling Elijah to go east and hide by the brook of Cherith, near the Jordan. There, the Lord said, he would care for him. And so Elijah went, finding shelter in a rocky gorge where the brook still trickled faintly over stones. There, in the wilderness, God did something miraculous. Each morning and evening, ravens came flying from the sky, carrying bread and meat in their beaks. Elijah drank from the brook, hidden and sustained by the hand of the Lord. Days turned into weeks. The king searched in vain. Jezebel's fury burned hotter than the sun. But Elijah waited, listening, praying, and trusting. He was alone but not forsaken. For even in the silence of exile, God was preparing his prophet for something greater. Time passed, the skies refused to give rain, and the earth cried out in thirst. Day after day, Elijah remained by the brook of Cherith, hidden away under the rocky cliffs. The Lord had fed him with the bread and meat delivered by ravens, and he drank from the stream as long as it flowed. But now, even the brook began to dry. The stones at the bottom became visible. The water grew shallow, then muddy, then silent. Then, the voice of the Lord came to Elijah again. Go at once to Zarephath, in the region of Sidon, and stay there. I have commanded a widow there to supply you with food. Elijah rose and left the shelter of the gorge. He traveled north, through barren hills and empty villages. The land was broken by drought, no crops, no harvests, only dust and silence. Starving animals wandered the roads, and mothers cradled their crying children. The famine had grown fierce. After many days, Elijah reached the city gates of Zarephath, a coastal town far outside Israel's borders. As he entered the gate, he saw a woman gathering sticks. Her clothes were worn, and her eyes carried the weight of suffering. This was the widow. Elijah called out to her gently, Please, would you bring me a little water in a jar so I may drink? She turned, startled, and nodded. As she went to get it, Elijah called again. And bring me, please, a piece of bread. The woman stopped. She turned back slowly, her voice trembling. As surely as the Lord your God lives, she said, I don't have any bread, only a handful of flour in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am gathering a few sticks to take home and make a meal for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. There was silence. The wind brushed the dust between them, but Elijah spoke with calm, firm assurance. Don't be afraid. Go home and do as you said. But first make a small loaf of bread for me, from what you have, and bring it to me. Then make something for yourself and your son. For this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, the jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the day the Lord sends rain on the land. The widow looked into Elijah's eyes. Something in his voice, his faith, his peace stirred her soul. She nodded, turned, and walked home. In her small kitchen, she measured the flour. Just a handful, the oil barely enough to wet the dough. She baked the bread as Elijah asked. Her son watched in silence, wide-eyed and unsure. She returned and gave the bread to the prophet. Elijah blessed it and ate. Then the woman and her son ate, too. And when she looked again, there was still flour in the jar, still oil in the jug. The next day more bread. And the next, day after day, the miracle continued. Though the famine raged outside, inside her home there was always enough. God had honored his word. Elijah stayed with them in the upper room of their house. The widow, though once hopeless, now saw that the God of Israel was a God who sees and provides. In a foreign land, through the faith of a poor woman, the power of the Lord continued to shine. The drought still held the world in its grip, but in that humble home, a light of mercy burned bright. Elijah had stayed many days in the home of the widow and her son. Though the land still suffered under the weight of drought and famine, their household was different. Flour remained in the jar, oil in the jug, just as the Lord had promised. The widow's house had become a place of quiet provision and peace. The boy laughed more. He played by the doorway. Elijah often sat with him, telling stories of God's wonders. The widow worked with a renewed spirit, hope having returned to her heart. But one day, everything changed. The boy fell sick. At first, it seemed like a small illness, just fatigue. But soon, he grew weak. His skin burned with fever. His breath came in shallow gasps. The widow tried everything: cool cloths, herbs, prayers, but nothing helped. The sickness deepened. Then, one afternoon, the child stopped breathing. The widow screamed. She fell to her knees and held her son's still body in her arms. Her heart shattered with grief. She turned on Elijah with anguish in her eyes. "What do you have against me, man of God?" she cried. "Did you come to remind me of my sin and kill my son?" Elijah was stunned. He looked at the boy, lifeless, pale. His own heart ached with sorrow. But he didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. Instead, he gently took the child from her arms, climbed the stairs to the upper room where he stayed, and laid the boy on his own bed. Then Elijah cried out to the Lord, "Lord my God, have you brought tragedy even on this widow I am staying with, by causing her son to die?" He stretched himself out on the boy 3 times, a symbol of deep intercession, and prayed earnestly. "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." Once, twice, 3 times. He begged, not in pride, but in humility, desperation, love. And then, the Lord heard Elijah's cry. The boy opened his eyes. He was alive. Elijah lifted the child in his arms and descended the stairs. The widow stood waiting, face streaked with tears. When she saw her son breathing, awake, she froze. Elijah smiled gently and said, "Look, your son is alive." The widow fell to her knees, not from sorrow this time, but from awe. "Now I know that you are a man of God," she said, weeping, "and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth." From that day on, Elijah was no longer just a guest. He was a vessel of God's mercy in her life. And the widow, once a broken-hearted mother, now became a believer in the power of the one true God. In the darkest moment, when all seemed lost, the Lord showed that his power not only sustains life but restores it. King Ahab grew angrier by the day. The people of Israel were suffering. Crops had died. Wells had run dry. And yet, instead of turning back to God, Ahab and his queen, Jezebel, led the people even deeper into the worship of Baal, a false god. They built altars to Baal. They bowed to idols made of stone and gold. Jezebel even ordered the prophets of the Lord to be hunted. Many were killed. Only a few survived, hiding in caves, afraid to speak God's name. But Elijah was not afraid. God spoke to Elijah and said, "Go, present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land." So Elijah came out of hiding. He stood tall and walked into danger, into the very courts of the wicked king. Ahab scowled. "Is that you, you troubler of Israel?" But Elijah answered boldly, "I have not made trouble for Israel. You and your father's house have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and followed the Baals." Then Elijah made a challenge. "Summon all of Israel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah. Meet me on Mount Carmel. There, we will see whose God answers by fire." And Ahab agreed. All of Israel came to watch. The prophets of Baal wore fine robes and golden ornaments. Elijah stood alone, a prophet with no army, no wealth, and no fear. He cried out to the people, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, then follow him." The crowd was silent. Elijah gave instructions. 2 bulls, 2 altars, 1 for Baal, 1 for the Lord. The prophets of Baal would go first. They would call on their God to send fire. Elijah would do the same. The God who answered by fire, he would be the true God. They cried out. They danced. They leapt around the altar. They cut themselves with swords until blood ran down. But nothing happened. No fire. No voice. No one listening. At noon, Elijah mocked them. "Shout louder. Maybe he's asleep, or busy, or traveling," but Baal did not answer. Then it was Elijah's turn. He rebuilt the altar of the Lord with 12 stones, 1 for each tribe of Israel. He placed the wood and the bull upon it. And then, he did something surprising. "Fill 4 large jars with water," he said. "Pour it on the offering and the wood." They poured the water. He told them, "Do it again." Then again, a 3rd time, water soaked the altar. It ran down and filled the trench around it. Then Elijah stepped forward. No dancing, no shouting, just a prayer. "Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." Fire fell from the sky, a blast of divine power. It consumed the sacrifice. It burned the wood, the stones, the soil, even the water in the trench. The people fell face down in awe and cried out, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." Elijah stood strong. The Lord had answered by fire. Truth had returned to the mountaintop. The fire had fallen from heaven. The altar was gone, consumed completely. The people had seen it with their own eyes and fell face down, crying out, "The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God." But Elijah wasn't finished yet. The land had been dry for 3.5 years, not a drop of rain. But now Elijah knew God was ready to restore. He turned to King Ahab and said, "Go, eat and drink. For there is the sound of a heavy rain." There were no clouds in the sky, not yet. But Elijah heard it by faith. The rain was coming. Ahab rode off in his chariot. But Elijah climbed back up to the top of Mount Carmel, alone again with God. Elijah bent down low. He placed his face between his knees and prayed. He prayed for rain. He called to his servant, "Go and look toward the sea." The young man ran and looked toward the horizon. Nothing but blue sky and stillness. "There's nothing there," the servant said. Elijah didn't stop. He prayed again. "Go look again." Still, nothing. A 3rd time, a 4th time, a 5th time. The servant returned each time, shaking his head. The sky remained empty, but Elijah kept praying. On the 7th time, the servant came back, this time, his eyes wide with wonder. "I saw a cloud, as small as a man's hand, rising from the sea." Elijah stood up at once. That little cloud was enough. He turned to the servant and said, "Go tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." And just then, the sky began to change. The sun vanished behind dark clouds. The air filled with the scent of rain. Lightning flashed on the horizon, and the rain began to fall. It started as a whisper, then a downpour. Heavy, soaking rain poured over the land that had been starved for years. Crops drank deeply. Wells began to rise. The curse was breaking, and God was bringing healing. Ahab raced in his chariot down the road. But something even more amazing happened. The power of the Lord came upon Elijah, and he ran. Elijah ran with supernatural speed, faster than horses, faster than chariots, all the way to Jezreel, ahead of Ahab. The people of Israel had seen the fire. Now they saw the rain. God had spoken through his prophet. The drought was over, hope had returned. The rain had come, and the drought was over. The people had seen God's power through Elijah, but not everyone was pleased. Queen Jezebel was furious. She vowed to kill Elijah. Elijah knew his life was in danger, so he fled. He ran through the wilderness, exhausted and afraid. The sun beat down on him. The rocks were sharp beneath his feet. His heart was heavy. He traveled far, to the wilderness near Mount Horeb, a lonely, barren place. There, Elijah sat beneath a broom tree and prayed, "Lord, I have done everything you asked. I am the only one left, and now they want to kill me." He felt alone and hopeless, but God was not done with Elijah yet. That night, a powerful wind swept through the mountains, breaking rocks and shaking the earth. But God was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake, a great shaking that split the rocks. But God was not in the earthquake. Next, a fire blazed through the wilderness. But God was not in the fire. After the fire, Elijah heard a still, small voice. It was God. "Elijah, why are you here?" Elijah answered honestly. God gave Elijah new instructions to anoint new leaders who would continue his work. Elijah's heart lifted. He was not alone. God was with him. Elijah rose, ready to continue his mission. Elijah's mission was almost complete. He had challenged kings, called down fire, prayed for rain, and spoken with God in the wilderness. But now, the time had come for Elijah to leave this world. God told Elijah to prepare his successor, Elisha. Elijah found Elisha working in the fields, plowing with oxen. Elijah threw his cloak over Elisha, a powerful symbol passing the prophetic mantle. Elisha understood. He left everything behind to follow Elijah. Together, they traveled across Israel, teaching, prophesying, and serving God's people. One day, God told Elijah to go to the Jordan River. There, Elijah and Elisha crossed the water on dry ground. As Elijah struck the river with his staff, the water parted, a miracle of God's power. As they walked on the riverbed, Elijah spoke to Elisha, "Ask what you wish before I am taken from you." Elisha boldly asked for a double portion of Elijah's spirit. Elijah promised it would happen if Elisha saw him taken away. Suddenly, a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared. They separated Elijah and Elisha. Elijah was taken up to heaven in a whirlwind, a glorious, fiery ascent. Elisha watched in awe. Though Elijah was gone, Elisha carried his spirit and mission forward. The story of Elijah ended, but God's work continued.